Look at the products you use. They've all got identifiers. My shirt has a little logo on it. I find it annoying sometimes that I'm carrying advertisements, but I happen to like this company's shirts. My computer has a logo on it. My PDA has a little logo here on it. Those are trademarks. Trademarks identify products. Service marks identify services. You'll see the same thing on the software and the CD you bought from us, and on our website we've got our trade and service marks. You put a TM after it if it's a trademark. Once you register it, you get the R, and thus it's similar with copyright. When you register a trade or a service mark, you get a much higher level of ability to enforce it. Who cares about trademarks and service marks? Well, a lot of people do. If you have a brand name, the brand name itself can be licensed. That's why you find Oshkosh clothing, you find John Deere clothing, you find Ralph Lauren all over the place. Those are all trademarks that have been, are brand names that are being licensed. Similarly, for your technology, if you have a clever name, you can trademark it and license that. That's important because even though the patent may expire, you may still, if the technology is still relevant downstream, be able to collect royalties off of the name. And alternatively, even if the patented technology is no longer relevant, if that kind of product now is associated with that name, you'll collect royalties in the future from the name, even though a new technology has been slipped in as the basis for the products. So, trade and service marks, well worth thinking about. Excuse me. Not worth getting hung up over if you can't think of one, but basically you just go and you start thinking about your buzzword generator, and that's the key to getting them. You're looking for something that rings true to the ear and carries the concept. One of my favorite ones is hosiery. Hosiery is, if you think about it, it really makes you think of nylons and that kind of stuff. It's sort of a sensual sound as opposed to Kleenex. Well, clean, the notion of cleaning, X, throw away, Kleenex, so on and so forth. So there should be something about the way the word sounds or the term sound that make you think of the product, and ideally the name of the product, like seaport, seeing, port, something you look through, but also a way to connect two cables so that you can get onto the internet. A port, seaport, for an internet-based software that gives you insight into commercialization. Okay. So we've gone through now trade secret, copyright, patents, trade and service marks. Want to come back and we'll very briefly talk about assets that can't be protected. Not all intellectual assets can be turned into property, nor are all intellectual assets protectable. Let me give you two examples. I'm thinking of some stuff, I've been trained, I'm thinking of work-related stuff, I'm mulling it over, da-de-da-de-da. Ooh, interesting idea, da-de-da-de-da-de-da. Nothing has been reduced to documentation. There's no physical form. Is there an asset? Yes, I've created something useful that can be deployed to create other useful things. I can use it in my work, but I can't document it in any way, and unless I convert it to a physical format, I cannot protect it. An extension of that is a conversation. If you and I have a conversation about a certain subject matter and we sign a non-disclosure agreement in advance or immediately afterwards, and we agree that this is confidential and that I or you own it, okay, we can protect it because there is a physical documentation, the NDA, that says this conversation was protected. If I videotape it like I am now, I can protect it because there's clearly a physical form. A conversation is physical. The sound waves come out of my mouth. They propagate through the air. There's a wave. It hits your eardrum. It goes boom, boom, boom. You hear what I'm saying. Your brain processes it. But all of that, unless it is somehow reduced to an enduring physical form, in other words, the wave dissipates over time, there's nothing, no record left of it. Without that record, I can't protect it. So not all intellectual assets, not all brain-created things that are useful can be protected. And you want to think about how I go about documenting things so that I can capture these as intellectual assets that can be converted into intellectual property, and when is the appropriate time to document it so that I'm not being overly burdensome. I want to talk very briefly about confidentiality. There's a ton of stuff on the web about confidentiality agreements. You can download a whole slew of them. My favorite place to download agreements is to look at various university agreements, because they've probably worked out most of the language and then modify that as it suits my customers' needs. You can go to sites like Onicle, which has agreements. Royalty Stat has agreements on it. The Autumn Association of University Technology Managers, you join that, you can get the Autumn Manual or buy the Autumn Manual without joining, and you can download agreements out of that are sort of draft model agreements. Variety of ways you can go and get agreements. That's not what I really want to focus on here. That's a long introduction to say that's not what I'm focusing on. I want to talk about what it means to say something's confidential. If I tell you something's confidential, it means I'm not telling anybody who doesn't acknowledge that it's confidential. What that means is you have to enforce on everybody you talk about this with who has signed an NDA that they do not talk about it with anybody else. They don't tell their wife, their husband, their sister, their brother, their mother, their father, their cousin, their dog. They don't tell anybody. They just keep it confidential. The second you start letting people tell other people, the second you run home and tell your wife, well, your wife probably can't testify against you in a court of law, but you tell a friend of yours, they can probably. If you tell them and somebody's trying to bust that confidentiality clause, they can pull them into court and say, look, they talked to them, they didn't make them sign an NDA, obviously not confidential. Got to think about that. That's how you can get yourself in trouble. If it's confidential, it has to always be treated as confidential. You can't treat it as confidential sometimes and not other times.